Over the past year, I've had a number of conversations with friends where they've asked me questions like this. Do you ever wonder what God could be up to in the midst of all these crises we've been facing? When I hear that question, I often think about a story I heard years ago. It's a story about a young woman by the name of Mary. During the Great Depression of the 1930s, Mary, who was the daughter of Italian immigrants, she was in her late teens, early 20s, and she was the only individual in her family who was able to find work. So here she is in the midst of all this difficulty, in the midst of a national crisis, facing the pressure of going to work every day, keeping her job and ensuring her family's financial survival. Could you imagine facing that kind of pressure? So as she went to work, there was another young lady who worked at the same local business who befriended her. She would greet Mary every day, talk with her, encourage her, and she even invited Mary to have lunch with her. And as they had lunch, Mary would come to realize that on most days, this woman would read her Bible during her lunch hour. And so she invited Mary to begin reading the Bible with her. Every day when they got together for lunch, they would read, and she would help Mary understand all that was on the pages, until finally she shared the gospel with Mary. This gospel, this good news, is about a God who loved and valued and cared for Mary. Despite her shortcomings and her failures, Mary came to understand that God loved her, and He sent His only Son for her to live and to die so that she could be forgiven and be secure in Him. And it was that newfound faith in Jesus that would sustain Mary and give her confidence and courage throughout the Great Depression. A little while later, she would meet a young man named Dominic who had that same faith in Jesus. They would fall in love, they would get married, and they would have children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and they have great-great-grandchildren today. And wouldn't you know, that same gospel that her friend shared with her all those years ago would permeate every generation of her family, including today. So you're probably wondering, Chris, how come you know so much about Mary and her family? Well, Mary is my great-grandmother. A few years ago, she went home to be with the Lord. But I miss her dearly, and I'm so grateful for her example to me. It's that same faith that her friend shared with her all those years ago that has sustained me and my family and given us courage and confidence during our crises of our day. So how did all of that start? It was just an intentional friend from work who chose to love their neighbor, to care for them, and share the hope of the gospel with them. So listen, I don't know all that God is up to. I don't know all that He's doing in the midst of our crises of our day. But I do know if you and I choose to be intentional, if we choose to place our trust in Him, if we choose to love our neighbor and share the hope that we have, that God can do more than we could ever ask or imagine in writing a better story for us and to invite others and lead others into a greater story than they could have ever imagined for themselves.